A first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, this evening, our top stories. Theresa May has insisted she is on course to deliver Brexit as she tried to shrug off a Commons defeat on key legislation. Rupert Murdoch has told Sky News the decision to sell the entertainment assets of 21st Century Fox to Disney will see Fox returning to its roots of news and sport. And 4 children have been killed and 7 people seriously hurt after a train collided with a school bus in the south of France. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they come in. In the next half hour, then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha, and the editor of Westmonster.com, Michael Heaver. Welcome to both of you. So plenty to talk about. Let's take a look at the front pages. And the Eye suggests the Conservatives could have more rebels in their ranks by the time a vote to formalise the date of Brexit takes place next week. The Express urges the sacking of any such rebels, including the ones who voted against the government last night. Daily Mirror declares May Day, suggesting a variety of reasons why the Prime Minister's political future might be under threat. Meanwhile, the FT leads with Disney's multi-billion-dollar deal with Rupert Murdoch for 21st Century Fox, as does The Guardian, which quotes Mr. Murdoch as saying it was a move to new business opportunities. The Mail reports on a High Court ruling that a suspected Iraqi insurgent is owed taxpayer compensation after he was held unlawfully by British troops. The number of homeless people in Britain has increased by 65% in the past 7 years, according to figures published in the Metro. The Telegraph reports that a Church of England panel wrongly branded a late bishop a paedophile following an apparently flawed investigation. In the Times, calls by a judge for an inquiry after a case against a student accused of rape was thrown out of court because police failed to provide evidence proving his innocence. And the Star warns that a widespread bout of flu in Australia could ruin Christmas down under. What about here? While the Sun criticises a mother who's defended her right to spend £2,000 on her children's Christmas presents, despite the fact they're on benefits. We're kind of getting Christmassy, but not quite with those stories, I think, probably. Flu and criticism. But anyway, Sonia Sodha and Michael Heaver are here. And it is to the Daily Mirror you would like to start with May Day. Things looking up or down for Theresa May?
Well, it's been a really tumultuous couple of weeks for Theresa May. So last week, Theresa May was sort of portrayed as the swell of her victory, managed to get her deal with Europe to move the European talks onto the next phase to talk about the final deal we're going to get with Europe. This week, she suffered a really important defeat in the House of Commons. The Brexit repeal bill is going through the Commons, and MPs from both parties united to defeat her on they defeated her. They got success for their own amendment, which basically says that any final deal has to come back to Parliament and be voted on by Parliament. Now, I think this is really significant, actually. I think there's now a coalition of MPs that actually includes some MPs that voted for Brexit, supporting the idea that Parliament should get a final say and should be able to scrutinise what the government goes out and gets for us. And I think it's very difficult for Brexiteers to dismiss that, because after all, a lot of them argued, well, leaving Europe is all about restoring parliamentary sovereignty, about taking back control. Now, this is exactly what's happening, but somehow people who...
But it's power to the people and not power to Parliament, isn't that the argument against that?
Yeah, but our MPs represent us. That's what democracy is all about. We're in Parliament to represent us. We voted to leave the EU, nothing more. We didn't vote for a particular deal. The idea that the government should just be able to shoehorn anything through in one of the most significant events that's going to happen to this country in the last sort of 40 years, without Parliament getting a say, is, I think, absolutely ridiculous. So I'm absolutely delighted that May was defeated in Parliament this week.
And the criticism of that result last night, and David Davis explained that today, it truncates the period with which Britain or the UK rather, and the EU can discuss things because of the timetable to bring it back before Parliament?
I think that's a very weak argument because everyone says that the deal sort of has to be done by next September, October anyway, because it's going to take 6 months to be ratified by the European Parliament and other institutions in the EU. There are other parliaments in Europe, I think.
Are you enjoying yourself,
I'm chomping at the bit to get in.
Don't worry, I'll be over to you in a second, Michael. But so given that it needs a few months to be ratified by the European Parliament, we might as well have our Parliament scrutinising it
Michael,
as well.
your turn.
Right, well, just the scene yesterday in Parliament of these MPs that were happy for the EU to be gone from Brussels to turn around and talk about parliamentary sovereignty. I mean, it was just unbelievable hypocrisy. And what we're now seeing, very interesting, talk of a second defeat, this time wiping any deadline day in terms of Brexit out the window. You're seeing a big dilution from politicians who are basically trying to kick the whole thing into the long grass. You had Lord Adonis, the Labour peer, very open that this is all about stopping Brexit. And now, I think
Dominic Grieve, to be fair, did not say that, and he made it correctly. He
Yeah,
did not. That's not his intention.
But we have to be...
There's a quite red spectrum of people supporting this, including some people who voted to leave.
But there's a real distinction to be made here, because what the likes of Dominic Grieve and Anna Soubry and people like that are saying is, oh no, we respect the vote, but we don't think there's any mandate to leave the single market. Now, if you don't leave the single market, that means you can't end open borders. So if you're in the single market, you have open borders. No one can say to me that Leave voters didn't go on June 23rd, 2016 to go and vote to end open door, uncontrolled mass migration. It's complete red herring.
But you were my reader, Michael, because that genuinely wasn't on the ballot paper in the referendum. It was a very simple question: should we stay in the European Union or should we leave?
Sonia, do you think people were voting Leave to keep the EU open borders? They weren't.
No,
were
but
they? They were voting to
saying,
leave.
I didn't vote Leave because of immigration.
Yeah,
But it was the main.
that.
I think we've
Some
lost
people do say
sight.
that.
This is what drove the campaign. This is what won it for Leave. Ending open borders, and people are forgetting about this. Politicians are completely kicking this into the long grass. If we Brexit but have open borders, there'll be huge public anger.
I think one of the reasons why there is a democratic deficit around all this, even though we did have a referendum, is that there's a very difficult trade-off at heart here. So if we leave the single market and the customs union, that will come, if we don't have freedom of movement of labour within the EU, that comes at a price. It's going to hurt us economically. If we do want to stay in the single market and customs union, then yes, Michael's right, we have to play along with the rules. Now, that trade-off...
He doesn't agree with you already.
But that
trade-off you cannot get around, and politicians are not being upfront with the public. The Prime Minister even is not being upfront with the public that there is this trade-off. We have to pick. The EU's always said that, and that trade-off exists, and the public were never asked.
Well, that was the referendum campaign, wasn't it? We had the debate about, do you want open borders, or is there going to be Project Fear? Is the economy going to come to a crashing halt?
That's not really the debate that we had, though, Michael.
Look, I'm telling you now, if politicians...
I'm sorry. Was that politicians who supported Leave went to the public, said, we can have it all, we can have our cake and eat it. If we vote to leave, there'll be £350 million extra a week for the NHS. That's a claim that's been rubbish.
If politicians want to make the case that, we'll leave the European Union, but we'll have open borders, they are in for massive electoral consequences. This double guessing from Remainers that they think they can get this slyly past, that, no, we'll have Brexit, but we'll stay in the single market and the customs union. It's damn right dangerous, because I've already had people on Twitter say to me, I don't normally vote. I voted in the referendum for radical political change, and I feel like there was no point voting. Politicians don't care. They move the goalposts to suit their agenda every single time.
While I'm really enjoying this conversation, I do feel it's one we should have had before the referendum, and now we need to look at the reality of where we are now.
And we have to end open borders. That's Brexit.
Okay, which is another vote next week about putting the date into law, enshrining the date into law. But also now we're looking at the reaction of Theresa May at this Brussels dinner this evening. She got a big round of applause.
Theresa May, very popular in Brussels. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. When you look at the negotiation, it's hard to think of a single real concession that the EU have made, and I think on the EU side there is a realisation.
It says a lot about our negotiating position. I mean,
why did we bother negotiating?
But I do think the DUP,
because I'm one of the people who thinks that leaving the EU without a deal would be disastrous for our economy, for our trading patterns.
So clearly, those are the messages we're also sending to the European Union.
But the thing is that it's sort of a fact. People kind of accept that, and they are the bigger partner. I mean, we do have some power in this negotiation. Don't get me wrong. And actually, the Europe did move on some things, like the role of the European Court of Justice. It wanted there to be an infinite role for that around citizens' rights. So it did move some way. But I think the fact is that you're absolutely right, Michael. We moved a lot further. We capitulated on a lot more. A lot of people said that was going to happen because we are the weaker partner in this, unfortunately. That's why there's a trade-off.
From what I've heard,
there's no sort of, have your cake
we're
and
not
eat
the
it
weaker
deal.
partner. Look, what I think put the spooks up people in Brussels was the DUP veto. I think that sort of made them realise that actually this isn't a done deal.
Okay.
That the British could potentially walk away. And look, they have got. You can argue any way you want. The fact is that if there isn't a deal done, it does hurt European economies. It does hurt the credibility of the European Union. And so I think one of the reasons now you're seeing the applause for Theresa May is because they think that she's someone they can do a deal with and get a lot of concessions.
And the message from the Irish Prime Minister today that the substantive trade bit of this that we're all hanging on for may not start for 3 months because transition will be the next thing we talk about. You're obviously a massive fan of transition, Michael, clearly.
No, I mean, I think the transition is the period we're in now, which is the 2-year Article 50 process.
That's
and again,
wishful thinking.
I think this is complete. Again, I think politicians have lost complete perspective. No one went to the polls on June 23rd, 2016, thinking that we'll leave, potentially end open borders and things like that in 2021, 2022 at the end of a transition. And hey, we know what politicians are like. Who's to say a 2-year transition doesn't become a 3, 4, 5-year one? And I think the problem is this is becoming very drawn out. And I think voters, and I'm really concerned about this, no matter what you think, I think there's a potential crisis in democracy here with a lot of people that went and voted in the referendum, not seeing any substantial change, and basically thinking,
what about the 16+ million people who didn't want to see it at all? Do they get absolutely no look in? Should this not be a Brexit for the whole of the country?
And the polls show that barely anyone now wants the government to abandon Brexit. I think it's down to about 12-15% in the latest YouGov poll actually want to abandon Brexit. I think
the polls can sort of show what you're looking for, actually, because there are also polls that show that there's a majority of the public who would support remaining in the single market and the customs union.
Just quickly back to the newspapers.
Sure.
Express sacked the rebels. Do you support that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you have to. And I think, for these people to make the argument they're making, I'll go back to it. Their argument is, and we've heard various MPs say it today, and people at Anna Soubry are very open and honest about it. I respect the referendum result, but no, the UK must stay in the customs union and single market. If that happens, you will see big electoral consequences.
I'm afraid that the idea that you sack
betrayal.
MPs for standing up for their principles and doing their job is a very fundamentally anti-democratic one. It suggests that we're a country that can't put up with debates, discussion, and for me, I think it's actually really damaging. And actually, one of the front page stories that we wanted to talk about was on The Guardian, and Dominic Grieve, who was the MP who sort of led the rebellion on the Tory benches.
He put forward this amendment.
And he's spoken about how he's received death threats as a result. And I think that's, it shows the sort of tone and tenor of the political debate. He's called it febrile. I think he's absolutely right. The Daily Mail front page that we saw yesterday, which emblazoned the pictures of the Tory rebels kind of on the front page.
Saying proud of yourselves.
Yeah, saying, proud of yourselves. I mean, it's just such, we should, I can respect that there are MPs who believe different things to me and are going to vote differently in the House of Commons. That's part of our democracy. It's a great thing. The idea that people who don't agree with you should lose your jobs and be sacked in a democracy is a really, really worrying one.
No, I just think there's a lot of public anger over the fact politicians have essentially given themselves a veto over the will of the people, which was to leave the single market and customs union, whatever way you spin it. And there's going to be public anger about that, and MPs shouldn't be surprised if they want to go down that route.
Yes, but people are suggesting that they're voting on the deal that's presented to them or no deal, because there won't be time to talk about another one. So we will see. Anyway, still to come, the mum on benefits facing criticism for spending £2,000 on her children's Christmas. What do you think about that?